My son said, "Either you give my wife your room or you leave." I smiled and said, "I'll be out by Sunday." But what they didn't know was that I had already made a plan. And what happened next completely destroyed them. Let me take you back to where it started. My name is Lorraine Mercer. I'm 58 years old, a registered nurse for 33 years at County General. I raised my son Tyler alone after his father walked out when he was 6. I worked double shifts, sacrificed everything, put him through college, taught him to be honest, to be loyal, to be a good man. When he married Madison Crane 2 years ago, I opened my home and my heart to her. She was beautiful, charming, called me mom within weeks. I thought I was gaining a daughter. I thought we'd be family. This is the story of how they tried to steal my home and how I made them pay for every inch of betrayal. It was a Tuesday in late September when the ground first shifted beneath my feet. I came home from a 12-hour shift, exhausted, feet throbbing, wanting nothing but a hot shower in my worn leather recliner. The one my mother bought me when I graduated nursing school, positioned perfectly by the window where afternoon light pools in like honey. Except when I walked through my front door, grocery bags cutting into my palms, it wasn't there. I stood frozen in the entryway, staring at my living room like I'd wandered into a stranger's house. The recliner was gone. In its place sat a sleek gray sectional I'd never seen before, all sharp angles and modern fabric. My coffee table, the oak one Tyler built me in high school shop class, still bearing the slight wobble from an uneven leg, was shoved against the far wall like garbage, replaced by a cold glass monstrosity that looked like it belonged in a magazine, not a home. "Lorraine! You're home!" Madison appeared from the kitchen, all gleaming teeth and bright eyes, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She was wearing one of my aprons, the faded sunflower one I've had for 20 years. "I hope you don't mind," she said, sweeping her arm around like a game show host revealing a prize. "I did a little rearranging while you were at work. Doesn't it feel more open, more modern? I've been watching these home renovation shows and I thought, this space has so much potential." She smiled wider, waiting for praise. I set the groceries down on the counter with trembling hands. "Where's my chair?" My voice came out flat, controlled. She waved dismissively. "Oh, that old thing? I put it in the garage. It was so dated, Lorraine. This sectional is much better for entertaining. And it was on sale!" She said it like she'd done me a favor, like I should be grateful. That word. Dated. My mother's chair. The one she saved 6 months to buy. The one where I rocked Tyler to sleep when he had nightmares, where I sat with her the night before she died. That chair was dated. I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest, but I kept my face neutral. "And my coffee table? The one Tyler made?" Madison's laugh was light, airy, careless. "Storage! We can donate it if you want. Tyler and I picked this new one up at West Elm. Our treat. Consider it our contribution to the house. Our contribution to my house, the house I'd been paying the mortgage on for 37 years, where I'd raised my son alone, where every wall held memories she had no right to erase. But I didn't say that. Not yet. I just nodded, smiled tightly, and went to put away groceries while Madison hummed behind me, completely oblivious, or pretending to be, to the line she'd just crossed. That night at dinner, I watched my son, really watched him. Tyler sat across from me at the table I'd bought when he was 10, pushing pasta around his plate, eyes fixed on anything but me, the wall, his phone, the window. Madison dominated the conversation, a stream of chatter about her yoga class, some podcast about manifesting abundance, her new skincare routine that cost more than my monthly electric bill. Tyler nodded along at the appropriate moments, making small, agreeable sounds, but his movements were mechanical, rehearsed, like a puppet going through motions. This wasn't the boy who used to tell me everything, who came home from school bursting with stories. This was someone else wearing my son's face. Lorraine, Madison said suddenly, spearing a cherry tomato with surgical precision. This house is really quite cramped for 3 adults, don't you think? I looked up from my plate. It's 4 bedrooms, 1,500 square feet. She tilted her head, studying me like I was a problem requiring a solution. Well, yes, technically, but the layout is so inefficient. All these small rooms instead of open concept. And someone your age doesn't really need all this space, do they? Maybe something smaller would be easier to manage. A nice little apartment, or one of those senior living communities with activities. Someone my age. I'm 58, not elderly, not incapable. I've worked 50-hour weeks for decades. But she said it so sweetly, with such practiced concern, that anyone listening might think she cared. Tyler finally spoke. His voice quiet but deliberate. Madison's just thinking ahead, Mom. You know, for when we start a family, we'll need the space. Not if we start a family. When. Like it was decided, inevitable, and my presence in my own home was the obstacle they needed to remove. I set down my fork, looked at my son, really looked at him, searching for any trace of the boy who once defended me on the playground, who held my hand at his father's abandonment, who promised he'd never leave me. I found nothing but avoidance. I see, I said quietly. Madison reached across the table and squeezed my hand, her nails perfectly manicured in that trendy millennial pink. We're all family here. We just want what's best for everyone, right, Tyler? He nodded without meeting my eyes. I smiled, excused myself, and went to my bedroom, my heart pounding a rhythm that sounded like warning bells. The door was slightly ajar. I always close my door. It's habit, instinct, the privacy I've maintained for decades. But now it stood open just an inch, like an invitation I never gave. Inside, everything looked normal at first glance. Same furniture, same layout, same cream-colored walls I painted 3 years ago. But I've lived in this room for 37 years. I know every inch, every shadow, every object's exact placement. My reading glasses weren't on the nightstand where I'd left them that morning. They were on the dresser, folded differently. My favorite mug, the chipped one that says "World's Okayest Mom" that Tyler gave me as a joke when he was 16, wasn't in its usual spot by my book. It was in the bathroom, still damp, like someone had used it. And my jewelry box. My mother's jewelry box, rosewood with a tiny ballerina that spins when you open it, her most precious possession handed down to me the day she died. It was moved, just slightly, an inch to the left on my dresser. I opened it with shaking hands, my breath caught in my throat. Everything was there, her pearl necklace, my grandmother's engagement ring, the locket with Tyler's newborn picture inside, the small diamond earrings I bought myself when I got my nursing license. Nothing stolen, but everything had been touched, handled, rearranged. The pearls weren't coiled the way I coil them, clockwise and tight. The ring wasn't nestled in its velvet slot. The locket was face down when I always keep it face up so I can see Tyler's face. Someone had been in here, going through my most intimate possessions, cataloging my life like I was already gone. The violation made my skin crawl, made me want to scrub everything clean, but instead I carefully put each item back in its proper place, my hands steady even as my mind raced with questions I didn't want to answer. Tyler knocked softly around 10 o'clock, poked his head through my doorway without waiting for permission. "Night, Mom." He stepped in, kissed my forehead, quick, perfunctory, already backing toward the door like he couldn't leave fast enough. His lips were cold. "Tyler," I said quietly. He paused, hand on the doorframe. "Do you ever come into my room when I'm not home?" His eyes flickered just for a second, something guilty crossing his face before he smoothed it away. "What? No, why would I?" The lie was clumsy, obvious, insulting. "Just wondering," I said, keeping my voice light, giving him an exit. He took it, disappearing down the hall without another word, closing his own door with a soft click that sounded like a lock turning. I lay awake for hours in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, listening. At midnight, I heard them. Low, urgent voices seeping through the wall we shared. I couldn't make out words, just tone. Conspiratorial, secretive, planning something. They say you don't see the ocean rising until you're already underwater. That's how betrayal works. 1 inch at a time. The next morning, I found it while retrieving my phone charger that had slipped behind the new sectional. The couch Madison bought without asking, that didn't belong in my living room, that erased my mother's memory from this space. Tucked between the cushions was a real estate brochure, glossy and expensive looking. Coastal properties and estates, premier listings. I pulled it out slowly, my heart already knowing what I'd find. My address was circled in red pen on page 3, surrounded by comparable sales in the neighborhood, and next to it, in Madison's distinctive looping handwriting, ST, value $680,000. Equity, $400,000 plus. Research trust options. I stared at those words for a long time, sitting on that foreign couch in my own living room, feeling everything click into place. They weren't just pushing me out. They were calculating exactly how much my life was worth, how much they'd gain when I was gone. I folded the brochure carefully, slipped it into my purse, and smiled, because now I knew exactly what they were planning, and I was already 3 moves ahead. I woke at 2 in the morning to the sound of hushed arguing. At first, I thought I was dreaming, that half-conscious state where reality and sleep blur together. But then I heard Madison's voice, sharp and clear. "She's not going to live forever, Tyler. We need to think practically." My eyes snapped open. I lay perfectly still, heart hammering, straining to hear more. Their voices came from the kitchen, low and urgent, the kind of conversation people have when they think no one's listening. I slipped out of bed, bare feet silent on hardwood, and crept to my bedroom door. The hallway stretched before me, dim and shadowy, a no-man's land between their world and mine. I moved like a ghost, staying close to the wall, avoiding floorboards I knew creaked. Kitchen light spilled into the hallway, casting long shadows. I stopped just before the doorway, pressed against the wall, holding my breath. "This house is wasted on her," Madison said, voice dripping with contempt. "She's one person in 4 bedrooms, it's selfish. We're young, starting our lives, and we're crammed into a guest room like visitors." Glass hit countertop, someone setting down a wine glass too hard. "We are visiting, Madison," Tyler said, but his voice was weak, uncertain. "This is Mom's house. She raised me here. Madison cut him off with a bitter laugh. "She's your mother, not mine. And I didn't marry you to live like a guest in someone else's home for the next 20 years. 20 years. She'd calculated how long I might live. The hallway tilted around me, and I pressed my palm against the wall to steady myself. "We can't just kick her out," Tyler said, and for one desperate moment I thought my son might defend me. "She's 60, she works full-time, 58, Madison corrected coldly. "And exactly, she's never here. Why does she need all this space? She could get a nice apartment closer to the hospital, cut her commute, simplify her life. We'd be doing her a favor." The way she said favor made my stomach turn, like evicting me was an act of kindness, like I should thank them. "I don't know," Tyler said, wavering. "It feels wrong." "What feels wrong," Madison said, voice dropping to something softer, more manipulative, "is watching you sacrifice our future because you feel guilty. Your mother is a grown woman. She'll be fine. Better than fine. She'll have freedom, and we'll finally have the space to build the family we've been dreaming about." Silence, long and heavy. Then Tyler's voice, barely a whisper. "Maybe you're right." Those 3 words broke something in me. I backed away from the kitchen, moving slowly, carefully, made it to my room, closed the door with trembling hands, and sat on my bed in darkness. I raised him to be kind, to be loyal. I didn't realize I was raising him to be weak. The next morning, Madison was a vision of cheerful domesticity. She'd made breakfast, eggs, toast, fresh orange juice arranged like a magazine spread. "Good morning," she sang when I emerged. "I hope you slept well." She was performing for Tyler, who sat scrolling his phone, avoiding my gaze. I poured coffee and ate in silence, watching Madison chatter about yoga class, lunch plans, shopping. She never looked at me directly, but I felt her watching from the corner of her eye, assessing, calculating. The eggs tasted like cardboard, but I ate mechanically, maintaining the routine that kept me sane. My phone rang mid-morning while I folded laundry, Pamela's name flashing on screen. "Lorraine, hi! Want to grab coffee this week?" Pamela and I had been friends since nursing school. 35 years of shared shifts and life crises. She knew me better than almost anyone. "Sure," I said, trying to sound normal. "Coffee sounds great." Silence. Then, "What's wrong?" I should have known better than to try lying to her. "Nothing's wrong." "Lorraine," her voice was firm, "I've known you since Reagan was president. Don't bullshit me. What's wrong?" I sat on my bed, suddenly exhausted. "It's complicated." Complicated like I need advice, or complicated like I need a lawyer? She wasn't joking. Pamela was quiet, thinking. Lunch. Thursday. That Italian place. 1 o'clock. And don't you dare cancel. Pamela, 1 o'clock. I'm not asking. She hung up before I could protest. I stared at my phone, feeling something loosen in my chest. At least someone was on my side. At least I wasn't completely alone. I finished folding laundry, putting each item away with careful precision. When I came to the living room, Tyler stood by the window, hands in pockets, looking uncomfortable. Madison had conveniently disappeared, giving him space to do what she'd told him to do. "Mom," he started, not quite looking at me. "Can we talk?" "Of course." I sat on Madison's sectional and waited. Tyler shifted his weight, cleared his throat, ran his hand through his hair, all his nervous gestures since childhood. "Have you ever thought about downsizing? The house is a lot for one person, with your commute, maintenance, everything." He trailed off, finally meeting my eyes, looking for agreement, permission, absolution. I let the silence stretch, watched him squirm, then asked quietly, "Why would I leave my own house?" Tyler blinked, opened his mouth, closed it. "I just thought, Madison and I were talking, and I know what you and Madison were talking about," I said, keeping my voice level. "I heard you, last night, 2 a.m, in the kitchen." Color drained from his face. "Mom, I'm not leaving my house, Tyler." I stood, walked past him toward my bedroom. "Not for you, not for her, not for anyone." I closed the door, hands shaking, and went straight to my closet. Pulled down the fireproof safe from the top shelf, the one with all my important documents. Inside was the property deed, the one I'd been paying on for 37 years. The mortgage was paid off. I'd made that final payment 3 years ago, celebrated with Pamela over champagne. But there was a lien, a second mortgage I'd taken out 10 years ago when Tyler needed emergency surgery, when his appendix burst and he had no insurance. $20,000 borrowed against the house, paid to Greg Sullivan's property management trust. I'd been making payments slowly, carefully. The balance, $12,000 remaining. The house was mine, yes, but not entirely, not yet. And if something happened, if I missed payments, if terms changed, the house could be taken, could be sold, could be lost. I stared at that document for a long time, mind racing through possibilities, scenarios, consequences. Then I carefully folded it, locked it back in the safe, and smiled. Because now I knew exactly how vulnerable I was, which meant I knew exactly how to protect myself. And sometimes the best defense is a calculated offense. They wanted my house. They'd calculated my worth, my remaining years, my usefulness. But they'd forgotten one thing. I'd been fighting battles they couldn't imagine since before they were born. And I was just getting started. Friday arrived with the weight of inevitability. Madison announced that morning, announced, not asked, that we'd be having a family dinner that evening. "Nothing fancy," she said brightly, arranging fresh flowers in a vase I didn't recognize. "Just the 3 of us, good food, quality time." Tyler nodded too enthusiastically, like a man who'd rehearsed his reactions. I agreed because refusing would have revealed that I knew what was coming, that I'd been preparing, that I was 3 steps ahead of whatever script Madison had written. I spent the afternoon cooking my mother's pot roast recipe, the one I'd made for Tyler every birthday until he turned 18, the one that filled the house with rosemary and garlic and home. I set the table with my good china, the set my mother gave me as a wedding gift before my husband left. 3 place settings, carefully arranged, each piece positioned with deliberate precision. Madison watched from the doorway, arms crossed, something calculating in her eyes. "You didn't have to go to so much trouble," she said, though we both knew she expected nothing less. "It's no trouble," I replied, lighting candles. "Family dinner should be special." The irony of that word, family, hung in the air between us, sharp and bitter. Tyler came home at 6, tie loosened, looking exhausted and anxious. He kissed Madison first, long and lingering, drawing strength from her. Then me, quick and guilty on the cheek. We sat down at 6:30, golden hour light streaming through windows, making everything look warm and safe and utterly false. The roast was perfect, tender, falling apart, exactly how Tyler liked it. I'd made mashed potatoes from scratch, green beans with almonds, homemade rolls still warm, a feast, a last meal. Tyler ate hungrily, praising between bites, "This is amazing, Mom, just like I remember." But Madison barely touched her plate. She pushed food around with her fork, took tiny bites, kept checking her phone, not even trying to be subtle. She sighed dramatically every few minutes, each exhale loaded with impatience. Tyler refilled his wine glass. Then again, and again. By the third pour, I knew we were approaching the moment. She let us get halfway through before she struck. The fork clattered against her plate with deliberate force. "Lorraine," she said, and the way she said my name, not Mom, not anymore, sent ice down my spine. "We need to talk about the living situation." I set down my wine glass slowly, carefully, maintaining perfect composure. "What about it?" Tyler's hand froze halfway to his mouth. Madison leaned forward, elbows on the table, expression shifting into something that tried to look sympathetic. "Tyler and I are starting a family. We need space, real space, not a guest room with a double bed and no closet." "This house has 4 bedrooms," I interrupted, voice level. "The 2 spare rooms upstairs are larger than yours. You could renovate, combine them." "We need the master," Madison cut me off. There it was, the real demand. It's the only one with an ensuite bathroom, the only one with the walk-in closet, the only one actually suitable for a family. She said it like it was obvious, reasonable, like I was being difficult. "You understand, don't you, Lorraine?" She tilted her head, manufactured sympathy dripping. "At your age, you don't really need all that space. The guest room on the first floor would be more practical. Easier access, no stairs when you're older." "I'm 58, Madison, not elderly." My voice was ice. "And that's my bedroom. In my house." The air crystallized into something sharp and dangerous. Madison's smile never wavered, but her eyes went cold, flat, reptilian. She looked at Tyler. A long, pointed look, a command without words. Tyler set down his fork, drained his wine glass, and when he looked at me, my son, my baby boy, looked at me like I was the enemy. "Mom." His voice was hard, unfamiliar, borrowed from Madison's script. "Either you give Madison your room, or you need to find somewhere else to live." The silence that followed was absolute. Candles flickered. The roast grew cold. The house held its breath. I looked at my son, really looked at him, searched his face for any trace of the boy who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms, who cried at shelter commercials, who promised he'd never leave me. I found nothing but a stranger wearing his face, parroting his wife's words. When someone shows you who they are, believe them, even if it's your own blood. I stood slowly, deliberately, folded my napkin with precise movements, set it beside my plate. "I'll be out by Sunday," I said quietly. Madison's face lit up with triumph, a smirk playing at her mouth. Tyler couldn't meet my eyes, staring at his wine glass like it held absolution. I walked to my bedroom, closed the door, and stood in the center of the room I'd slept in for 37 years. The room where I'd cried over my husband's abandonment, where I'd rocked Tyler through colic, where I'd gotten the call about my mother's death. This room held my entire adult life, and they wanted it, demanded it, threatened me for it. I pulled my suitcase from the closet, opened it on the bed, and began to pack. But I wasn't crying, wasn't broken. I was smiling. I packed methodically. Photo albums went in first. Tyler's baby pictures, my mother's wedding photos, documentation of a life they wanted to erase. Then my mother's jewelry, the deed, my passport, nursing credentials. I packed like I was going to war because I was. My phone buzzed. "Pamela, Thursday still good?" I texted back, "Make it tomorrow. Emergency." Her response was immediate. "I'll be there, whatever you need." I sat on the edge of my bed, suitcase half full, and allowed myself one moment of grief, one moment to mourn the son I'd lost, the family I'd wanted, the home stolen from me 1 inch at a time. Then I opened my laptop and typed, "Houses for sale Seaside." If they wanted my room, my space, my home, fine, I'd leave. But not defeated, not diminished, not begging. I'd leave on my terms, with my dignity intact, and I'd make damn sure they regretted tonight. Because I just realized something they hadn't considered: the house wasn't fully paid off. The lien from Greg Sullivan's trust meant they couldn't just take over. They'd need to refinance, assume the debt, prove their income. And they couldn't do any of that without me signing off, without me cooperating, which I had absolutely no intention of doing. I smiled wider, scrolling through property listings, planning my next move. Sunday, I'd told them. I'd be out by Sunday. What I didn't say was where I was going, or what I was taking with me, or that their victory was about to become their worst nightmare. They thought they'd won. They thought evicting me from my bedroom was the end of this story. But they'd just handed me the opening move in a game they didn't even know we were playing. And I'd been playing chess while they were still learning checkers. Saturday disappeared in a blur of cardboard and tape. I packed in silence. 37 years compressed into boxes that would fit in my sedan. Each framed photograph, each piece of my mother's china, each worn book felt like evidence in a trial I hadn't been allowed to attend. This was my home. These were my things. And I was packing them like a thief because my own son had given me an ultimatum over dinner. I moved methodically, taking only what mattered. Photos documenting Tyler's childhood, my mother's jewelry, legal documents that proved who I was before they tried to erase me. Madison appeared in my doorway around 2, leaning against the frame like she owned it. "Need any help?" Her voice dripped with false concern, sweetness that was really poison wrapped in sugar. She was performing, playing the gracious victor offering assistance to the defeated. I didn't look up from the box I was packing. Photo albums, Tyler's baby book, Mother's Day cards with macaroni and glitter. "No, I'm fine." My voice stayed flat, emotionless, refusing to give her satisfaction. Madison lingered, shifting her weight, clearly hoping for tears or begging or drama she could describe to friends. She got none of it. After uncomfortable silence, she disappeared, and I heard her whispering to Tyler in the kitchen. Tyler knocked around 6, looking miserable, hands in pockets, unable to meet my eyes. "Mom, I didn't mean for it to go like this." His voice was small, uncertain, testing whether I'd forgive him if he just sounded sorry enough. I stopped packing, turned to face him fully. "Yes, you did." He blinked, stunned, opened his mouth to protest. I cut him off. "Madison wrote the script, but you said the lines. You made the choice. Own it." He stood there, drowning in guilt that wouldn't change anything, then left without another word. I went back to packing, hands steady, mind clear. They wanted me gone. They thought that made them winners. They didn't realize I was already 3 moves ahead. Among my papers, I found something I'd nearly forgotten. An old bill from Greg Sullivan Property Management, dated 10 years back. The year Tyler's appendix burst, the year medical bills drowned me, the year I'd been desperate enough to sign anything. I'd taken a second mortgage through Greg's trust, $20,000 that saved Tyler's life. Reading the fine print I'd been too panicked to understand then, I realized something crucial. The deed wasn't entirely mine. It was held in trust by Greg Sullivan until that loan was paid off. The house was mine to live in, but not mine to sell or transfer, which meant Tyler and Madison couldn't just claim ownership. They'd need my cooperation, my signature, my permission, and I had absolutely no intention of giving them any of those things. I made copies of everything. The original deed, the trust documents, the payment history, the outstanding balance. Took the originals to the bank Saturday evening and locked them in a safety deposit box where Madison's greedy hands couldn't reach them. The bank manager, a woman I'd known 15 years, asked if everything was all right. I smiled and said I was just being careful. She didn't press, but her eyes held understanding. Women always know when another woman is preparing for war. Each box I sealed felt like armor. Each item I donated felt like shedding weight I no longer needed. At midnight, when Tyler and Madison were asleep planning their future in my bedroom, I called Pamela. She answered on the first ring, voice alert, despite the hour. "Lorraine? What's wrong?" I kept my voice low, sitting on my bedroom floor surrounded by boxes. "I need a place to stay, just for a few days." Silence, then Pamela's voice turned sharp with fury. "What did they do?" I told her everything. The rearranged furniture, the midnight whispers, the ultimatum, Tyler's cutting words. When I finished, Pamela was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Stay as long as you need, a week, a month, a year. Those ungrateful, entitled—" She continued for another minute, her rage on my behalf warming something cold inside me. After we hung up, I made one more call. Dale Winters answered on the third ring, confused but alert. "Lorraine? It's midnight. Is everything okay?" Dale and I had known each other 5 years. We'd met when his mother was in my cardiac unit, and I'd held his hand while she coded and survived. He'd told me then that he owed me. "I need a house, Dale, fast, somewhere quiet, somewhere they can't find me." I didn't explain who they were. I didn't need to. Dale was quiet, thinking, calculating. "I have something," he said finally. "Seaside property, small cottage, estate sale. The family wants it gone fast. Settling the will. It's perfect for you, Lorraine. Peaceful, private ocean view." He quoted a price that made my savings wince but not break. Decades of nursing overtime, careful budgeting, sacrificing everything for Tyler's future. "Can I see it tomorrow?" "I'll pick you up at 9, Dale said without hesitation. "And Lorraine? Whatever you're running from, you're doing the right thing." Sunday morning arrived cold and clear. I loaded my car before sunrise, carrying boxes quietly while Tyler and Madison slept. My sedan was packed to the ceiling. Clothes, documents, photos, everything that mattered compressed into barely enough space. I made 3 trips in silence, refusing to cry or rage or give them satisfaction. On the final trip, I glanced up at their bedroom window. Madison stood there watching, arms crossed, actually smiling. She raised one hand and waved, grinning like she'd won the lottery. Behind her, Tyler's silhouette stood back from the window, looking sick but saying nothing. Choosing her over me one final time. I put the last box in my trunk, closed it with deliberate care, and walked back into the house one more time. Went to my bedroom, no, just a bedroom now, soon to be Madison's, and did a final sweep. The closet was empty, the drawers bare, the walls showed pale squares where my photos had hung. 37 years erased in a weekend. I stood in the center memorizing it one last time, then walked out and closed the door, didn't lock it, didn't leave a note, didn't give them ammunition to claim I'd been dramatic or petty. I climbed into my car, started the engine, and drove away from the house I'd bought with my own money. Raised my son in, nearly died to keep. Drove away without looking back. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away with your head high and let your absence speak louder than any words ever could. Sometimes leaving is the strongest statement you can make. And sometimes the people who demanded you go don't realize what they've lost until it's far too late to get it back. I had no idea yet what my absence would trigger. The clauses and contracts I'd forgotten, the legal landmines I'd unknowingly set by simply doing what they'd demanded. All I knew was that I was free. Free of their whispers and their greed and their entitled demands. Free to start over on my own terms. And that freedom, in that moment, was worth everything I was leaving behind. I spent Sunday night at Pamela's, sleeping in her guest room while she plied me with wine and rage. "You should sue them," she said for the 10th time, pacing her kitchen at midnight. "You should take everything." "I'm going to do something better," I told her, though I wasn't sure yet what. Just that it existed, forming in my mind like storm clouds gathering. Monday morning, Dale's text arrived at 8:30, "Ready when you are." I was showered and dressed by 8:45, wearing my favorite blue sweater and my mother's pearl earrings. If I was starting over, I was doing it looking like someone who'd chosen this, not someone thrown out like garbage. Dale picked me up at 9 sharp in a silver SUV that smelled like coffee and new leather. He didn't ask questions, just handed me a travel mug. 40-minute drive. You'll see it coming over the rise. White cottage, blue shutters, wraparound porch, sits on a bluff overlooking the ocean. He was right. When we crested the hill and the cottage came into view, something in my chest loosened for the first time in weeks. It was small, maybe a third the size of the house I'd left, but perfect. White clapboard siding, weathered blue shutters, a porch wrapping around 3 sides, and beyond it, endless ocean stretching to the horizon. Dale pulled into the gravel driveway. "Want to see inside?" I was already opening the door. The cottage had 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen with windows overlooking the water, and a living room with a stone fireplace. Hardwood floors that creaked in friendly ways, crown molding installed with care, built-in bookshelves begging to be filled. It was quiet. deeply, profoundly quiet in a way my old house hadn't been since Tyler brought Madison home. I walked through each room slowly, touching walls, looking out windows, feeling something I hadn't felt in months: peace. "It's perfect," I said, turning to Dale, who'd been watching from the doorway with a small smile. "When can I move in?" Dale's smile widened. "The family wants it gone. Settling the estate? Nobody wants the maintenance responsibility. Cash offer closes in 48 hours. Can you do that?" I thought of my savings account, carefully built over decades of overtime shifts. Thought of Tyler's college fund I'd exhausted, his emergency surgery I'd mortgaged my house for, every sacrifice for a son who'd chosen his wife's greed over his mother's dignity. "Yes," I said, "I can do that." We went back to Dale's office, and I wrote a check that made my hand shake. Not from fear, from liberation. This was mine, bought with my own money, chosen by my own will, owned by me alone. No trust, no lien, no Tyler's name anywhere. Just mine. Dale processed the paperwork with efficient speed, making calls, sending emails, pushing the sale through with urgency. By Wednesday afternoon, I had keys in my hand and my name on a deed. Pamela helped me move boxes from her garage into the cottage, made 2 trips in her pickup, refused to let me do heavy lifting. We unpacked until sunset, and she produced 2 bottles of wine. "To new beginnings," she said, raising her glass on my new porch as the sun melted into the ocean. "And to burning bridges." I laughed for the first time in weeks. "To burning bridges," I echoed, and we drank to the sound of waves. That night, I stood alone on my porch at sunset, watching the sky turn pink and gold over water. Salt air filled my lungs, sharp and clean, washing away the stale taste of betrayal. I felt peace. Not happiness, that would come later, but peace. The deep certainty that I'd made the right choice, that leaving was survival, that this cottage, this ocean, this solitude was exactly what I needed. They thought they were taking my home. What they didn't understand, home isn't a place, it's power, and I just bought mine back. My phone buzzed. Tyler's name flashed. "Mom, where are you? We need to talk." I stared at those words, thumb hovering over reply, then slid the phone back into my pocket unanswered. I didn't owe him explanations, my location, my peace. He'd made his choice. The next morning, I woke to sunlight through unfamiliar windows and waves instead of traffic. I made coffee, carried it to the porch, and watched sunrise paint the water gold. My phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me press accept. "Ms. Mercer? This is Linda Chen from First National Bank, Mortgage Division." My heart skipped. The lien, the trust, the $12,000 I still owed. "Yes?" I said carefully, setting down my coffee with a suddenly trembling hand. "I'm calling about 447 Maple Street, the property under the Sullivan Trust with you as primary beneficiary and resident. We've been trying to reach you there, but the current occupants said you no longer live there. Is that correct?" "Yes," I said slowly. "I moved out Sunday." "Why?" Papers shuffled. "Miss Mercer, the trust terms require you maintain primary residence while the loan is outstanding. Your departure constitutes a breach of the residency clause. The trust automatically reverts to Greg Sullivan, and the current occupants have 30 days to either assume the debt and refinance in their own names or vacate the premises." The world stopped spinning. Everything went still except for waves and my heartbeat pounding. "I'm sorry, can you repeat that?" Linda repeated it patiently, explaining the legal intricacies I'd signed away 10 years ago in desperation. The house wasn't mine to give them, wasn't theirs to take. Without me living there, making payments, the trust defaulted to Greg Sullivan's management. Tyler and Madison had 30 days to prove they could afford to take over the mortgage and refinance $12,000. 30 days to prove ownership rights they didn't have. Tyler worked mid-level sales, Madison had no job. Together they might make $60,000 a year, not nearly enough to qualify for a mortgage on a $680,000 property. "What happens if they can't refinance?" I asked, though I knew. "Then the property reverts to Mr. Sullivan's management, and he can choose to sell or rent it. The current occupants would need to vacate." Linda's voice held sympathy. "I'm sorry. I know this is complicated. Did you want me to send the official documentation? Yes, I said. Send everything to my new address. I gave her the cottage information and hung up. I sat very still on my porch with cold coffee and warm sunlight, and the most perfect revenge I could never have planned. They'd kicked me out to take my house, and in doing so, they'd just lost everything. I didn't call Tyler back, didn't warn him, didn't do anything but sit and watch waves and smile. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't something you plan. Sometimes it's just the natural consequence of people's own greed destroying them. Sometimes the universe has a sense of justice more poetic than anything I could orchestrate. I raised my coffee mug to the ocean, to the sunrise, to the cottage that was mine alone. To karma, I whispered, and to 30 days. The waves answered, eternal and relentless, washing away the past with every tide. The first week at the cottage passed in a haze of salt air and silence. I developed a routine that felt sacred. Wake at dawn, make coffee, carry it to the porch, and watch the sun rise over the ocean. The waves became my soundtrack, constant and cleansing, washing away 37 years of accumulated pain with every tide. I unpacked slowly, deliberately, placing each item with intention. My mother's china in the kitchen cabinet where morning light would hit it. Tyler's baby photos in the guest room closet where I wouldn't have to see them daily. My nursing textbooks on the built-in shelves. Gem of a life I'd built with my own hands. My phone rang constantly. Tyler's number flashing at all hours. Madison calling from their landline, from her cell, from numbers I didn't recognize. Even Madison's mother started leaving messages. Lorraine, how could you abandon them like this? They're family. Tyler is your son. You're being selfish and cruel. I listened to each voicemail once, then blocked the number. One by one, I silenced every voice that demanded I explain myself, that insisted I owed them anything, that tried to make me the villain in a story where I was the victim. Silence became my weapon, my shield, my power. Pamela visited on Thursday with takeout and wine. Have you heard from them? She asked, settling into my porch chair like she'd been coming here for years. I watched the waves, sipped my wine. No, and I won't. She studied my face, looking for cracks, for doubts, for any sign I might weaken. Found none. Good, she said finally. They made their bed. Let them lie in it. We ate in comfortable silence, and I realized this was the first meal I'd enjoyed in months. No tension, no passive-aggressive comments, no walking on eggshells, just food and friendship and the sound of the sea. Dale stopped by Friday afternoon with a housewarming gift. A massive bouquet of fresh flowers, sunflowers and daisies that smelled like summer. You look good, Lorraine, he said, and there was something in his voice, something warm and genuine, happy. I was surprised to realize he was right. I was happy, or at least I was healing. The wound was still there, still raw, but it wasn't bleeding anymore. Thank you, I said, for everything, the house, the rush, You don't have to thank me, Dale interrupted gently. You did this. I just opened a door. You walked through it. I began walking the beach every morning after coffee, collecting shells and sea glass, feeling my body remember what it was like to move without anxiety crushing my chest. I bought a journal at the local bookstore and started writing. Not about Tyler and Madison, not about betrayal, but about the ocean and the sky and the life I was building from scratch. I even bought watercolors and spent afternoons on my porch trying to capture the way sunlight hit the waves. I was terrible at it, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that I was doing things for myself again, things I'd abandoned during decades of putting everyone else first. At the local market on Saturday, I ran into Janet, an old colleague from County General who'd retired last year. Lorraine, I didn't know you lived out here now. How's Tyler? The question was innocent, friendly, but it still felt like a knife. We're taking space, I said carefully, measuring my words. Going through some changes. Janet's eyes sharpened with understanding. She'd been a nurse long enough to read between lines. She squeezed my hand. Good for you, she said quietly. Sometimes space is exactly what we need. She didn't ask for details, didn't pry, just understood. I appreciated her more in that moment than I could express. On Sunday, exactly 2 weeks after I'd left, a letter arrived forwarded from Pamela's address. The return address made my heart stop. Sullivan Property Management and Trust, Greg Sullivan, Executor. Official, legal. The moment I'd been waiting for without quite knowing I was waiting. I carried it to my kitchen table, made a fresh pot of coffee, and sat down. My hands were steady as I opened the envelope. Inside were 3 pages of legal documentation, dense with terms and clauses and official language. I read slowly, carefully, savoring every word. Dear Ms. Mercer, this letter serves as official notification that the property located at 447 Maple Street has reverted to trust management effective October 15, 2025, due to breach of residency requirements outlined in Section 4.2 of the original trust agreement dated October 2015. As you are no longer maintaining primary residence at the property and the outstanding balance of $12,000 remains unpaid by current occupants, the trust has initiated standard recovery procedures. Current occupants Tyler Mercer and Madison Mercer have been served notice to either assume full financial responsibility through qualified refinancing within 15 days or vacate the premises. Please contact our office if you have questions regarding your rights under the trust agreement. I set down the letter and smiled. Not a small smile. A wide, genuine smile that felt like sunshine breaking through clouds. Revenge isn't loud. It's not screaming or threats. Revenge is watching the trap spring shut while you're miles away drinking tea, or in my case, drinking coffee on a porch by the sea, while my son and his wife discovered that greed has consequences. I didn't feel guilty, didn't feel conflicted. I felt satisfied, justified, free. They'd wanted me gone, and I'd left. Now they'd learn what my absence actually cost them. I raised my coffee mug to the empty kitchen, to the legal documents, to the universe that had delivered justice I hadn't even asked for. 15 days. They had 15 days to come up with money they didn't have, to prove ownership they couldn't prove, to save a house they'd stolen. And I had 15 days to simply exist in peace while their world crumbled. 2 weeks passed in blessed peace. I fell into a rhythm: yoga on the porch at sunrise, beach walks before lunch, afternoons reading or painting, evenings watching the sun set over the water. I was becoming someone new, or maybe someone old, the version of myself I'd been before marriage and motherhood and sacrifice became my entire identity. Pamela visited twice more. Dale stopped by with fish he'd caught, taught me how to cook it properly. I slept through the nights without waking to listen for whispers through walls. The cottage wrapped around me like a sanctuary, and I began to understand what home actually meant. On a Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang from a blocked number. I'd been screening calls religiously, but this time my finger slipped and hit accept instead of decline. "Mom! Oh, thank God, I've been trying to reach you for—" Tyler's voice, frantic and desperate, filled my ear. For a moment I froze. Then something cold and clear settled over me. "There's nothing to discuss," I said calmly. "Mom, please, we need to talk. There's been a mistake with the house, some legal thing, and we need your—" I hung up, blocked the number, set the phone down, went back to my book like the interruption had never happened. My hands didn't shake, my heart didn't race. I felt nothing but a distant, detached satisfaction. That evening, Pamela called, and I could hear laughter in her voice before she even spoke. "Lorraine, you need to hear this." I set down my tea, smiling at her tone. "Tell me, Janet, you know Janet from county? Her daughter works at the courthouse downtown. She saw Madison there this morning. Apparently she was crying in the hallway, yelling at some lawyer about how this couldn't be happening, how it wasn't fair, how her mother-in-law was destroying her life." Pamela paused for effect. "Janet's daughter said Madison looked like she'd been crying for days, hair a mess, no makeup, completely falling apart." I said nothing, but I knew Pamela could hear my smile through the phone. "Lorraine? I'm here. You okay?" "I'm perfect," I said truthfully. "Absolutely perfect." We talked for a few more minutes, but my mind was elsewhere, already anticipating what would come next. The legal machinery had started turning. The consequences were rolling downhill like an avalanche, and I was safely out of the way, watching from my cottage by the sea. The next day, a large envelope arrived via certified mail. I had to sign for it, the postal worker eyeing me curiously as I scrawled my signature. The return address, Sullivan Property Management and Trust, Legal Department. My heart beat faster, but not from anxiety, from anticipation. I carried it inside, made coffee, and sat at my kitchen table with the afternoon sun streaming through the windows. Inside were multiple documents, official and final. Copies of eviction notices served to Tyler Mercer and Madison Mercer. Photos of the house, my old house, being assessed by appraisers. Property valuation reports, legal briefs, and a handwritten note paper-clipped to the top. Lorraine, thought you'd want to see this. Your son and daughter-in-law tried to claim ownership based on verbal promises and implied inheritance. They presented no legal documentation because none exists. When I explained the trust terms, they became hostile. Your daughter-in-law threatened to sue me, you, and the bank. Your son tried a different approach. He attempted to forge your signature on a quitclaim deed to transfer the property to himself. My attorney caught it immediately. It's now on file with the county recorder and the police. I'm not pressing charges yet, but it's evidence of fraud. They have 72 hours to vacate the premises. After that, sheriff's deputies will remove them. I'm sorry it came to this. Call if you need anything, Greg. I spread the documents across my table, read every word, studied every photo. The house looked the same from the outside. The porch I'd swept 1,000 times, the garden I'd planted, the mailbox I'd replaced 3 years ago. But it wasn't mine anymore, wasn't theirs. Belonged to a trust and a system they'd tried to manipulate. Tyler had tried to forge my signature. My son, the boy I'd raised to be honest, had committed fraud, had tried to steal from me officially, legally, putting it in writing. The evidence was right here in black and white. People always think mercy means giving second chances. Sometimes mercy is letting someone face the consequences they earned. I didn't feel guilty, didn't feel conflicted, didn't feel anything but cold, clean justice. They'd demanded I leave, I'd left. Now they were learning that actions have consequences, that greed has a price, that you can't kick someone out of their own home and expect to keep it for yourself. 72 hours, 3 days. They'd have to pack their lives into boxes like I had, carry them out to the curb, figure out where to go, feel the humiliation of eviction, of failure, of losing everything because of their own cruelty. I made myself another cup of coffee, carried it to the porch, and watched the waves. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. My phone stayed silent. The cottage stayed peaceful. And somewhere, 30 miles away, Tyler and Madison were scrambling, panicking, realizing too late that they'd destroyed themselves. I raised my mug to the ocean, to the sunset, to karma and justice and the beautiful, terrible poetry of consequences. 72 hours, I whispered to the waves. The countdown begins. Eviction day arrived on a Thursday morning, bright and cold. I didn't go. Couldn't have paid me to witness it in person. But Greg Sullivan texted me at 9:15 a.m. It's happening. Thought you'd want to know. Then the photos started arriving. Sheriff's deputies on the lawn, 2 of them, official vehicles parked in the driveway where I used to park my sedan. Madison on the front steps, mouth open mid-scream, mascara streaked down her face, pointing at the deputies, like she could will them away through sheer fury. Tyler standing behind her, stone-faced and hollow-eyed, staring at nothing. And their belongings, mountains of boxes and furniture piled on the curb like trash waiting for collection, the same boxes I'd packed my life into weeks ago. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. I zoomed in on one photo, close enough to see the box labeled Master Bedroom in Madison's looping handwriting. The bedroom they'd demanded. The room they'd evicted me to steal. Now sitting curbside in the autumn cold while neighbors walked by and stared. Karma doesn't wear a watch, but she always arrives right on time. I made coffee and studied each photo Greg sent like evidence in a case I'd already won. In one image, Madison's mother had arrived. A woman I'd met exactly twice, both times unpleasant. She was shouting at one of the deputies, jabbing her finger at his chest, face red with rage. Greg's next text included audio. "This is illegal. That's their house. You can't just throw them out." The deputy's response was calm, professional, bored even. "Ma'am, I need you to step back. The property belongs to the Sullivan Trust. These occupants were served proper notice 15 days ago. They failed to vacate voluntarily. This is a legal eviction. But his mother..." Madison's mother sputtered. "His mother what?" the deputy asked. His mother maintained the residence under trust terms. She's no longer in residence. These occupants have no legal claim to the property. This is the third time I'm asking you to step back. The audio cut off, but I could imagine the rest. The humiliation, the neighbors watching, the reality crashing down that screaming at law enforcement wouldn't change the facts. My phone started buzzing around 10 a.m. Tyler's number, still blocked from yesterday, showing up as blocked caller with notification after notification. I watched the count climb. 5 missed calls. 10, 16. Each one a moment of desperation I refused to answer. I blocked the blocked caller function entirely. If Tyler wanted to reach me, he'd have to find another way, and I had no intention of making that easy. Around noon, Pamela texted, "You need to see this." She sent me a link to the neighborhood Facebook group, a page I'd left months ago but she'd stayed in to keep tabs. The post had over 200 comments already. The screenshots Pamela forwarded showed Madison's Instagram from 3 weeks ago, posts she'd apparently deleted this morning, but the internet never forgets. Photos of our beautiful new home with my living room furniture rearranged. Exciting renovation plans for our master suite, with drawings of how she'd planned to gut my bedroom. So grateful for this chapter with a photo of her and Tyler toasting wine in my kitchen. The comments on the Facebook post were brutal. Wait, wasn't that Lorraine's house? The nurse who worked at County? I saw her moving out a few weeks ago. She looked so sad. What happened? My cousin works with Tyler. Apparently he kicked his mother out so his wife could have her bedroom. That's disgusting. His mother raised him alone, paid for everything. And this is how he repays her? Public opinion had shifted. Tyler and Madison weren't sympathetic victims of a cruel legal system. They were entitled parasites who tried to steal from a woman who'd given them everything. The court of public opinion had rendered its verdict, and it was damning. I read through the comments, feeling something cold and satisfied settle in my chest. I hadn't said a word, hadn't posted, hadn't gossiped, hadn't defended myself. I'd simply left. And in my absence, the truth had emerged anyway. People weren't stupid. They'd seen me pack my car, seen Madison waving from the window, put the pieces together. Around 3 p.m., Greg texted again. "They're trying to sue you." Emotional distress and unlawful eviction. My attorney says it's completely baseless. You have no legal relationship to the property anymore, and they were evicted by the trust, not by you. Want me to countersue for the fraud attempt? I stared at that message for a long time. Thought about Tyler's forged signature, about Madison's greed, about how they'd tried every angle to steal what wasn't theirs. Countersuing would be justified, legal, satisfying. But it would also keep me tied to them, keep me in their orbit, keep me engaged in their drama. I typed back, "No, let them drown." Greg's response came immediately. "Understood. For what it's worth, Lorraine, you're handling this with more grace than most people would." Grace. Was that what this was? It didn't feel like grace. It felt like survival, like self-preservation, like finally choosing myself after decades of choosing everyone else. I set my phone down and walked out to the porch. The sun was starting its descent toward the horizon, painting the ocean in shades of amber and rose. Somewhere, Tyler and Madison were homeless, desperate, facing consequences they'd earned through their own cruelty and greed. And I was here, in my cottage, drinking coffee, watching the waves, free. I didn't feel guilty, didn't feel conflicted. I felt lighter than I had in years, like I'd been carrying a weight I didn't even realize was crushing me until it was gone. Tyler had made his choices. Every step, from allowing Madison to rearrange my furniture to forging my signature, had been a choice. Now he was learning what happens when choices have consequences, when actions leave scars, when bridges burn so completely there's no crossing back. The curb, I thought, remembering those photos of their belongings piled like trash. That's where they put me, metaphorically, emotionally. Now that's where they are, literally. The poetry of it was almost too perfect, almost too cruel. But I hadn't orchestrated this. I'd simply left when they told me to. Everything else, the trust terms, the eviction, the fraud investigation, that was consequences, that was justice. That was karma doing what karma does best, arriving exactly when needed, precisely on time. 3 days after the eviction, I was painting on my porch. Acrylics, seascape, trying to capture how afternoon light hits the waves. I was terrible at it, but that didn't matter. The act itself was therapeutic. Choosing colors, making brushstrokes, creating something that didn't exist before. I'd spent so many years in service to others that doing something purely for myself felt revolutionary. The cottage had become my sanctuary. My phone rang. Unknown number, not blocked. I almost didn't answer. My finger hovered over decline. But something, intuition, curiosity, fate, made me press accept. "Mom?" Tyler's voice hit me like a physical blow. Broken, hollow, desperate. I said nothing. Let the silence stretch between us like a chasm. Let him fill it. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." His voice cracked on the second sorry, and I heard tears underneath. Real tears, not manipulation. But tears didn't erase betrayal, didn't undo damage, didn't rebuild bridges he'd burned. "I didn't know," he continued, words tumbling out in a rush. "I didn't know about the trust, about the legal stuff, about what would happen when you left. Madison said, she told me it would be fine, that we'd just take over the mortgage, that it was practically ours anyway since you were getting older and—" "Stop," I said quietly. My voice was level, emotionless. "Just stop." He stopped. I heard him breathing on the other end, heard traffic in the background, heard the hollow quality that suggested he was in a car. "Madison left me," he said finally, 3 days ago, packed her stuff while I was at work, well, where I used to work, and left. She's staying with her mother. Says I ruined everything. Says it's my fault we're homeless, my fault we're broke, my fault her life is destroyed. The irony was so thick I almost laughed. Madison had orchestrated everything. The furniture rearranging, the bedroom demand, the ultimatum, but now that consequences arrived, suddenly it was Tyler's fault. Of course it was. "I've been sleeping in my car," Tyler continued, and his voice broke completely. "I lost my job. The fraud investigation, forging your signature, made local news. My boss saw it, said I was a liability. Let me go with no severance, no reference. I can't get another job, can't get an apartment without a job, can't do anything. I'm living in my car in a Walmart parking lot and He sobbed, actually sobbed. The sound of my son crying had once been enough to make me drop everything, to fix whatever was broken, to make it all okay. But that instinct was dead now, buried under ultimatums and betrayal and forged signatures. "Mom, I know I don't deserve it, but can we talk? Please? Can I come see you? Can we just—" "You made your choice, Tyler." My voice was even, calm, final. "Now live with it. Mom, please. I was stupid. I was so stupid. I let Madison manipulate me. I let her convince me that what we were doing was okay, that you'd be fine, that we deserved the house more than you did. I betrayed you. I know that. I know what I did was unforgivable. But I'm begging you—" "Yes," I interrupted, "you did betray me. You chose your wife's greed over your mother's dignity. You let her erase me from my own home. You stood there and told me to leave or give up my bedroom. You watched her wave goodbye like she'd won a prize. And then you tried to forge my signature, to steal my house legally." The silence that followed was absolute. "That's something you'll carry forever, Tyler. That's who you chose to be. And I can't fix that for you. I won't. Mom—" His voice was desperate, pleading, breaking apart. "I was wrong. I know I was wrong. I'm so sorry. Please. I'm your son. I'm all you have. We're family. Doesn't that mean anything? Forgiveness isn't owed. It's earned. And some debts can never be repaid." "You were my son," I said quietly. "But the boy I raised wouldn't have done what you did. That person is a stranger. And I don't owe strangers anything. Goodbye, Tyler." I hung up before he could respond, before he could beg more. Before maternal instinct could override self-respect. My hands were shaking. I set the phone down, picked up my paintbrush, tried to focus on the canvas, but tears blurred my vision. Not from sadness exactly, but from the finality of it. I'd just cut the last thread connecting me to my son, the boy I'd raised alone, sacrificed everything for, loved more than my own life. But he wasn't that boy anymore. Maybe he never had been. Maybe I'd been loving an idea, a memory, a version of him that only existed in my desperate need to believe I'd done something right. The phone buzzed. Not Tyler. Pamela. A text with a screenshot. You need to see this." It was Madison's Instagram, posted 2 hours ago. A photo of her with a man I didn't recognize, both of them smiling at a restaurant. The caption, "New beginnings. So excited to start this chapter with my fiancé." Engaged. Madison was engaged to someone she'd met, according to Pamela's follow-up text, less than 2 weeks ago, while Tyler was homeless, while he was jobless, while he was sleeping in his car and begging his mother for forgiveness. Madison had already moved on, already found her next victim, already rewritten the narrative where she was the survivor of a toxic situation rather than the architect of destruction. Tyler never had a chance. Not against Madison's manipulation, not against her narcissism, not against her complete lack of loyalty or conscience. But that didn't absolve him. He'd still made choices. He'd still sided with her against me. He'd still delivered that ultimatum over dinner. He was both victim and perpetrator, manipulated and complicit, and I couldn't save him from consequences he'd earned, even if part of me, a small dying part, still wished I could. I set my phone aside, picked up my paintbrush, and returned to my canvas. The seascape was taking shape despite my amateur technique. The ocean didn't care if I painted it perfectly. It just existed, vast, powerful, indifferent. I was learning to be like the ocean, to exist on my own terms, to let the waves wash away the past, to rebuild myself from salt and silence and stubborn survival. Tyler's voice still echoed in my head. Broken, desperate, sorry. But sorry wasn't enough. Sorry never would be. And I was finally learning that I didn't have to forgive, didn't have to fix, didn't have to sacrifice myself one more time for someone who'd already proven what I was worth to them. I painted until sunset, until the light faded and my back ached. Then I went inside, made dinner, and slept dreamlessly in my cottage by the sea. Alone, free, finally choosing myself. 6 months passed, like a dream I was afraid to wake from. The cottage transformed from a refuge into a home, real artwork on the walls, plants in every window, a reading chair by the fireplace worn soft from use. I'd painted the kitchen cabinets a cheerful yellow, hung wind chimes on the porch that sang with the ocean breeze, built raised garden beds where I grew tomatoes and herbs. Every change I made was deliberate, intentional, mine. No one rearranged my furniture. No one questioned my choices. No one made me feel like a guest in my own space. This was what peace felt like. This was what home actually meant. I was thriving in ways I hadn't thought possible. I joined a watercolor class at the community center. 8 women my age, all learning together, all terrible and laughing about it. Started volunteering twice a week at the local women's shelter, helping survivors fill out housing applications and navigate legal systems. I'd learned too well myself. Made friends with my neighbors. Janet from the market introduced me to her book club, and suddenly I had a social life that didn't revolve around Tyler or work or obligation. I was Lorraine again, not Tyler's mother, not a nurse first and person second, just Lorraine, and she was someone I was learning to like. Dale stopped by occasionally, always with some excuse, extra fish from a charter trip, a book he thought I'd enjoy, help fixing a loose porch board. But the excuses were getting thinner, and the visits were getting longer. We'd have coffee on the porch, talking about everything and nothing, and sometimes our hands would brush and neither of us would pull away. It wasn't love, not yet, maybe never. But it was possibility. It was the slow, careful building of something that didn't carry the weight of the past. Pamela visited monthly, always bringing wine and gossip, and we'd spend evenings on my porch laughing about the old neighborhood, like it was ancient history instead of 6 months ago. Through mutual friends and Janet's network of nurses who knew everyone's business, I learned that Tyler had moved out of state. Colorado, someone said, working construction, living in a small apartment, keeping his head down and rebuilding his life quietly. No social media, no drama, just working and existing and trying to become someone different than the man who destroyed everything. I felt nothing when I heard it. No satisfaction, no anger, no maternal concern, just nothing. He was alive. He was managing. That was enough. Madison's story was different. She'd remarried within 2 months, a whirlwind romance with a real estate developer. They were divorced within 4. Apparently karma works fast when you're predictable. I didn't celebrate her misfortune, but I didn't feel sorry for her either. In December, a Christmas card arrived from Greg Sullivan. Simple, elegant, with a handwritten note inside. "Lorraine, hope you're well. The house sold in November to a lovely young family, couple with 2 kids and a golden retriever. They planted roses in the front yard and painted the shutters blue. It's good to see it lived in properly again. Take care of yourself. You earned this peace." Greg, I held that card for a long time, imagining strangers in my old house, a family who'd fill it with laughter and memories and love, roses where I'd had petunias, blue shutters instead of white. It was someone else's home now, and somehow that felt right. Like the house had moved on too, found its proper purpose, been released from the toxic energy Tyler and Madison had brought to it. On a morning in late March, I stood on my porch at sunrise with coffee in hand, watching the waves crash and retreat, endless and reliable. The ocean had become my clock, my calendar, my meditation. It didn't judge, didn't demand, didn't betray. It just existed, vast and powerful and indifferent to human drama. I'd learned to be more like the ocean, to exist on my own terms, to let things wash away with the tide. I thought of Tyler, and for the first time in months, it didn't hurt. I didn't feel anger or betrayal or that crushing disappointment. I felt pity. He'd lost himself trying to please someone who couldn't be pleased. Maybe one day he'd find his way back to who he used to be. Maybe not. Either way, it wasn't my responsibility anymore. They say you can't go home again. I learned something better. You can build a new one, stronger, yours alone. I opened my journal, the leather worn soft from 6 months of daily entries, and wrote, "I raised a son. He became a stranger. But I became myself again. And that's enough." The words felt true in a way that didn't need elaboration. Some truths are simple. Some endings don't need bows. Some stories end not with resolution, but with release. I closed the journal, sipped my coffee, and watched the sun paint the water gold. Later that afternoon, mail arrived. Among the bills and catalogs was an envelope, plain white, no return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. Tyler's. Careful, deliberate letters he'd learned in 3rd grade when I'd sat with him night after night practicing cursive. I held it for a long moment, feeling the weight of whatever words waited inside. An apology, probably. An explanation. Maybe a plea for reconciliation, or just an update on his life, an attempt to rebuild connection he'd destroyed. I didn't open it, carried it inside, placed it in the drawer of my writing desk, and closed it gently. Maybe I'd read it tomorrow. Maybe next month. Maybe never. The power was mine now. To open or not open, to forgive or not forgive, to let him back into my life or keep him at ocean's distance. For the first time in my adult life, I got to choose, not out of obligation or duty or maternal instinct, but out of genuine desire. And right now, in this moment, I chose peace. I chose my cottage and my ocean and my new life. I chose myself. The letter could wait. Everything could wait, because I'd learned the most important lesson of all. I didn't owe anyone anything except the truth. And the truth was simple. I was free. Finally, completely, beautifully free. And that was worth more than any reconciliation, any apology, any attempt to resurrect what had died. The waves crashed outside my window, washing away yesterday's footprints, making room for today's journey. I poured another cup of coffee, picked up my paintbrush, and returned to the canvas on my easel. A seascape that was slowly, imperfectly becoming something beautiful. Like me, like my life. Imperfect but mine, scarred but whole. Broken and rebuilt into something stronger than before. The ocean taught me that. The cottage held me through it. And I learned what I should have known all along. Home isn't where you're born or where you raise your children. Home is where you finally learn to choose yourself. And I was home.